so important for all of you to give yourselves a round of applause, to give all the organizers, all the panelists, everyone, let's do it one more time. A huge round of applause for being here to celebrate the power of love and ensuring that together we ensure that the world is a world where the power of love overcomes the love of power. And that is how we will see justice in our lifetime and in this world and through the liberation of Palestine. So thank you for organizing this and for all of us being here today. Okay, so this panel is really about talking about the relationship between understanding how art is revolution, talking about how systemic racism and bias distorts the narratives the world receives about Palestine and Palestinians, and how through the artists that we're going to talk with today on the panel, how through their own work, they have used art and media as a form of resistance, fighting back against Zionist erasure, and replacing it with the full, complex, and multi-dimensional truth of Palestinian lives and experiences. This is hopefully going to be a conversation about radical power of storytelling, to build community, ignite solidarity, and affirm that truth and justice, as everyone has been saying and will keep saying it, will not be silenced. So let's dive right in. Estee?
Do you want to start with?
Amer Zahr.
Oh.
Well, okay, I'm just going to start with your bio.
Okay.
Amer Zahr, as you all know, is a Palestinian Arab American comedian, speaker, writer, academic, lawyer. I want to throw that in there. Adjunct professor at University of Detroit Mercy School of Law. He draws on his experiences growing up as a child of Palestinian refugees, performing and lecturing on topics like politics, society, culture, identity, Palestine, Islam, and more.
Miriam Arghandiwal is an Afghan American war reporter and writer-director. She's a lead organizer of Entertainment Labor for Palestine. They are the Hollywood workers' formation confronting entertainment industry silence on Gaza from inside the guilds. And Rolla Selbak is a Palestinian American writer, director, Sundance alumni, and founder of the Safina Filmmaker Project, a free mentorship initiative for Palestinian and Arab filmmakers. In March of 2025, after speaking out publicly and proudly about the genocide in Gaza, she was dropped by her representatives at the Creative Artist Agency. So let's get started with the conversation. Miriam, I wonder if you can talk about how the prioritization of Israeli narratives, like through use of passive language for Palestinian deaths, dehumanizing language, and the omission of crucial context are used to create systematic pro-Israel and US bias in war reporting and in an attempt to shape public opinion.
Yeah. I think the media has always had this problem when it comes to Black and brown lives, and we have seen it exacerbated. You know, we have seen it on crack, basically, these past 2 years. And it's to the point where the United Nations, a senior official for the United Nations, a former senior official, had said that the Western media can be held legally liable for their role that they have played in enabling the genocide in Gaza. And, you know, just some examples of that, you know, are when I was reporting in Afghanistan, anytime we said that the Taliban had claimed credit for an attack, we had to follow that up with a disclaimer that said the Taliban always like to claim credit for things, but were often lying. You know, I looked at Reuters' coverage of Palestine repeatedly through, you know, these last 2 years to see if once they would say that about the Israeli military. if they would say that once about the Israeli government, and it hasn't happened. You know, things like, even in Afghanistan, you know, we had a rule where it was 15 or more Afghans died in a bomb blast. It was a news story. 15 or less was not a news story because Afghans died all the time. And again, with Palestine, you see that exacerbated. You know, you have people in CNN saying a woman died when they're talking about a 6-year-old girl who had 355 bullets put into her. You know, you have people completely leaving out the name Israel when the Academy put out a statement about Hamdal Bilal being kidnapped by Israel. And so the omission, the dehumanization, I always say, you know, white supremacy is like an airborne disease, and white supremacy being the core of, you know, the rot in both America and Israel both. We inhale it and we get infected through media and through entertainment and through news. And so both of those things have been, I think, attacked very heavily the last 2 years, and I think has been shameful. As a member of both working, and you know, I've worked as a journalist and I've worked as an entertainment worker, I am ashamed of both of my industries significantly for how they've handled it and the spineless courage of not just the corporations, but the amount of people who have stayed silent in the face of it. The amount of coworkers who cried over people, our colleagues dying, you know, in Afghanistan, and sat by as almost 300 journalists have been killed by the Israeli military. It's disgusting, and I think it's something we all have to work to dismantle.
And I think to your point, Miriam, about how we all have to work to dismantle, and I think it's what all of you are doing in different ways through your art, through your organizing, through your work with media. Amer, I want to turn to you to talk about how you're doing that with comedy. Something that you've said that I really love, and I'm sure everyone else loves it in the room too, it's, quote, "For Palestinians, art isn't just decoration, it's revolution," end quote. Love that quote. Can you talk about how you use comedy as a form of resistance, as a way of fighting back and reclaiming the narratives, and as you said earlier, as a way of showing that we are not going anywhere?
Well, you know, Edward Said talked about permission to narrate, you know, to be able to tell our own story. We Palestinians have been fighting for that for a long time. And, you know, the images that happen in the media that have been amplified after October 7th, of course they existed for decades before that. I mean, remember when Russia invaded Ukraine, and I know as an Arab, so Arabs, we watch the news all the time because it's like our social activity, you know, because we're on it. So, I was watching news that day, and Russia invaded Ukraine, and I was like, you know, wow, this has nothing to do with us. You know, this is, you know, white on white war. You know, it has nothing. I've never seen this episode of war, this season of war. You know, it was going on for a week, and then remember when that CBS reporter got on the news and he said, you know, well, this is he said he was so taken aback by what's happening in Ukraine, because this is a civilized place, unlike Iraq and Afghanistan. Remember that? And I was really pissed off because now we have to get involved. You know, we had nothing to do with this. And now we have to like get on social media and say we're not uncivilized, and you know, we all have to start talking. We were not part of this. You know, we have this special power that we can be in the news even when the news has nothing to do with us. And that happened then. It happens whenever there's a mass shooting and they come out 3 seconds later because it's a white guy and they say, we can confirm that this is not terrorism, you know, which means it's not us. And so I learned a long time ago that you have to poke fun at these things because comedy in its purest form is a form of protest. And if you can make people laugh, they listen to you. And we Palestinians, so it's just another sort of art form that we use now. I've been lucky enough to use it for the last like 20 years in my career. And now there's a lot more Palestinian comedians. I started a Palestinian comedy festival in Palestine in 2015 where I take a bunch of comedians there and we perform. And so laughter is very, people say it's disarming. I don't like that because that makes it sound like you're doing it for the other person. You know, it's disarming so that they think you're human. No, it's actually very powerful for the person that is laughing at their oppressor. You know, if you ever see Palestinians when they get arrested, they smile. When the mother's martyr walks down the street, she's smiling. You know, when you have the truth, you can always be happy. So it's something very cool about that. And so turning that into comedy is just something I've tried to do so that we can tell our story a little bit more effectively. And, you know, luckily, some people have latched on and listened.
That's great. So Rolla, you're here forging your way in Hollywood. I wonder if you can talk about the kinds of censorship and public perceptions that result from the historically close relationship between Hollywood and the Pentagon via their entertainment media office, selectively assisting projects to conform to their quote unquote approved narratives, and avoiding descriptions of war crimes and veteran abuse, or like Miriam was saying, critical scrutiny.
Yeah, first of all, awesome question. Can you all hear us okay? Like the echoes like.
Here, I think this microphone's good.
Yeah? Okay, is it better now? I feel like the eye doctor. Is this better or this one? No. This one? Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so Hollywood and the, so exactly what you said. I think most of you already know, but the military has an entertainment wing. In fact, the US military specifically produced almost over 400 Hollywood movies. And so that goes from everywhere from consulting on the script to providing, cool planes and equipment, to literally editing scripts and suggesting, no, not this, yes, this, right? And so they've been extremely complicit in all of this. And so we are battling decades, starting from Exodus. You all remember Paul Newman, 1960, that romanticized this, idea of Israel and Zionism.
I thought you meant like biblical. I thought you meant like Exodus, like.
Oh yeah, I forgot where we were.
Like
Thank you.
Exodus.
No, sorry, the movie Exodus. So anyway, so it's been decades and decades, and I would like to correct just one thing you're saying. You're saying that I was forging my way through Hollywood. I'm actually forging my way out of Hollywood.
2 point. You forged in, and now you're forging out. We want to talk about that.
We're going somewhere else. I always say, like, my only regret about being dropped by CAA is that I didn't drop them first. Wallah, I should have.
So Rolla, I'm going to stay with you for a minute because I really appreciate what you're talking about forging your way out of Hollywood. And I think one of the things that I feel we don't often talk about enough when we're talking about the distorted narratives about Palestinians, Palestine, is this idea that often the Palestinian lives and experiences are represented very one-dimensionally and in very one-dimensional ways. So can you talk about how intersectionality feels essential to any real conversation about representation of Palestine and Palestinians in the media, and as a filmmaker, why that matters when we're talking about storytelling, truly reflecting the full dimensionality of intersecting identities, and how doing that itself can be an act of resistance and revolution.
Yeah, I mean, anything is an act of resistance when they don't want you to do it. So when I was, when I was still in the Hollywood system and writing for TV, I always felt like they either wanted us, right, as Arabs, as Muslims, as others, as Latino, as anyone who's other, right? They either want us to be a token or a villain. That's it. There's no in-betweeny, And so I always felt like I was being used as a tool. So originally they had brought me on to write I co-created a show called Yeah Bint with Dina Shahabi. It was, you know, it was supposed to be kind of like fun, dramedy, kind of like the female version of Rami. What's it like to be young Arab and female in LA, right? Oh, drama, da-da-da. And if I tell you the kind of asinine notes I would get back, I call it tea party in a mosque. So, you know, I'd write a scene about something, and these executives, man, they would come back and they'd be like, but Rolla, I hate how they say my name, Rolla, how about if it was in a mosque? I'm like, they're just hanging out in their room. Like, they don't hang out in a, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, but what if there was like kind of a tea, like a tea party in a mosque? And, you know, I'm like, I'm not gonna write that. I don't know who you think I am, but I'm not doing that. Another time they actually, quick story, they actually asked me, hey, by the way, they're looking for a Palestinian writer. They want to do a mini room, which means they don't want to pay you. They're going to do a mini room, and they need a Palestinian writer. I'm like, wait, really? They said Palestinian? You sure? Yeah. Okay, what's the project? Just meet with them first. Da, da, da. It turns out it was an Israeli show on Showtime, and they were looking for
what?
Israeli show, Israeli show, by an Israeli creator, and they wanted a Palestinian writer to humanize, I swear Allah, I'm not kidding, to humanize the wife of the terrorist and the daughter of the terrorist. And if I could sprinkle in a little bit of terrorist with heart of gold, you know, to give it the female touch type of thing. And so ever since then, and so I, of course, as everyone should hear if you're in the industry, I said, absolutely not. I'm not about to, you know, villainize my people any more than they are. So you can miss me with this. Thank you very much. So I've always had a contentious relationship with Hollywood, which is the right kind of relationship to have right now, I think. So, yeah.
I think another right relationship to have is the one that you have, Miriam. I wonder if you can take us back and tell us how Entertainment Labor for Palestine came together, and talk about what you feel have been some of the most impactful campaigns by Entertainment Labor for Palestine. I know there's some of you in the audience.
Yes. Entertainment Labor for Palestine came together when two of our comrades came together and wanted to do something for Palestine and our industry, and put together a letter, an open letter, calling on SAG-AFTRA to take action, to speak out against what was happening, to call for a ceasefire, and to condemn the widespread blacklisting that is going on continuously. And since then, we have done a plethora of things. We have tried to address and take on the different unions that we are all a part of, SAG-AFTRA, IATSE, the gaming industry, animation industry, have all had a lot of people trying to get resolutions passed through their unions, and also get workers' protections for people who are being blacklisted passed through their unions. In addition to that, we've supported the BDS campaigns against Disney, against Netflix, against Scream 7 for firing Melissa Biera. And we've been able to, and my experience in Hollywood has always been that people know what's right and wrong. People are just scared to speak up, right? It's like there's a culture of abuse and a culture of fear that allows pro-Palestinian silencing, that allows, you know, for black and brown men to be demonized the way they have in our thing, that allows for Me Too to even happen for so long, right? And so this, I think, so we really wanted to address that culture and to, you know, make sure that, because people know what the right thing is, but they don't have the courage to do it because they think they're going to be socially isolated or they're going to get fired. So an important thing for us was to show up on the streets. And we have been. Outside of WME, outside of the Academy, we shut down the Oscars. I was involved with the organizing of shutting it down 2 years, you know, not shutting it down, delaying it 2 years in a row. Thank you. For Scream 7, we didn't give them a moment of peace. When their trailer dropped, we made sure we stole their headlines. When they had their premiere, we made sure we stole their headlines. When they went to Comic-Con, we went after them and we made sure we stole their headlines. And so, you know, even if in the film, they say it's the highest grossing Scream film, but adjusted for inflation, it's only the 4th best performing film. So even with it being, you know, not a box office failure, you have an entire cast and crew of people who tried it and didn't get away with it. And that happened because people showed up, people normalized being outside of Paramount, people normalized being outside of these movie studios. And I think that's a big thing we have to work on because our unions have not given an inch. What happened pre-October 7th, they've not only not given an inch, but they've doubled down, including the studios. And so to that, I think we have to just make sure that, you know, if it's 40 of us going outside of a studio saying not in our town, we do that because that resistance needs to be there, that shaming needs to be there, that conscience needs to come back into this industry and into this town.
So I'm going to ask this question starting with you, Amer, and then if the rest of the panels, I feel like you could take my mic. I could take the weaker mic because my voice, okay. But I'm going to start with you, Amer, and then for the rest of the panels, if you can also comment. So, Amer, one of the things that you say, one of the things that you've said publicly is that there is something deeply empowering about making the oppressor the punchline. Or in your case, making the oppressor the headline. And so can you talk about that? And then what it feels like when you really see that land in the room, that feeling of empowerment, when the audience feels that empowerment too. And how that becomes what you describe as comedy's power to build community, but really for all of you in your art, how your art actually, and the work that you're doing actually builds community and creates spaces of solidarity where, going back to this idea of love, where lovers of truth and justice can come together.
Okay. So what was the question?
Yeah, okay.
No, I mean, what was the first thing you said that I said that was smart?
So you said, quote, there's something deeply empowering about making the oppressor the punchline.
Well, I mean, you know, can I just tell you a story? I don't like talking about what I do. So I like just doing it. So a couple stories. So I was sitting with a Palestinian in Ramallah maybe 10 years ago. And I said to him, what do you do? He said, Amer, I have a PhD in computer science from London. And I said, wow. And I wasn't surprised. You know, Palestinians, we have the highest rate of education, by the way, of any group in the world. We, you know, we work very hard. We get hyper educated, you know, because we don't have plan B. You know, we can't mess up and go back to our country. And we don't go on vacation because we don't like to leave our house for more than 2 or 3 days because we remember what happened last time we did that. So I said to him, what do you do? He says, I have a PhD in computer science. I said, nice, so what do you do? He said, we have a coffee shop downtown, okay? I said, hey man, you have a PhD in computer science. You could live anywhere in the world and you could make a lot of money and send it back to Palestine. He said, Amer, I will stay here in Palestine and fight till I'm free. I said, all right. First, like, calm down, you know. I'm on your side. I said, what will you do when you're free? He said, when I am free, I will leave. Okay? So, you know, we're talking about Sumud, and this is like the stubbornness of the Palestinians, right? They're not going anywhere and have a lot of babies. And, you know, Palestinians also have the highest birth rate on planet Earth. There have actually been more babies born in Gaza since October 2023 than we've lost. If you want to understand anything about, Palestinian love. You said love? Yeah. We love each other very much. I mean, 2,000 years ago, a woman in Palestine got pregnant and nobody touched her. So, you know, what do you think would happen when we start touching each other? So, we Palestinians have been using humor and sarcasm to talk about what's happening. Because remember, comedy is, again, I don't like being a comedy critic because I like being a comedian, but comedy is about pointing out the ridiculousness around you and trying to laugh at it. And if Palestinians, if there's anything that happens to us, it's ridiculousness over and over and over all the time. You know, being told by a bunch of, you know, people who are not from where we're from that we're not from where we're from. And, you know, living in a world where we have to listen to Zionists tell us that every Jew is from Palestine no matter what, and every Palestinian is not from Palestine no matter what. And we have to live in this world. And so there's really no other way to deal with it other than sarcasm and ridicule, I think. So they just don't know how to handle you when you laugh at them. You know, when they stick their hand down my pants at the airport, which they do, I'm like, you're doing this for your country, you know? Like, you're doing this to save your country? Okay, if that's what you've decided to do to save your country, you know, you're doing it for Israel? Okay, you know? But this is the only way to deal with that kind of stuff. We've been doing it through film. You should watch Elias Sleiman's films. You should watch a lot of other, you know, we've been doing it. Rolla is much more, can talk about that stuff much better than I can. But we've been doing it through film for a long time. So it's nothing new to us. So yes, we point out their ridiculousness, and they know it. And you know, that's why they're very uncomfortable around us.
Lightning round. Can you add in your experience, Rolla?
I'm sure I can. Okay, one thing I will say, what you're talking about, like comedy and an oppressor. I think now more than ever, because we're so gaslit all the time by these, you know, industries, that I feel like the fact that Iran is releasing Lego video every day, I think is all we need to know about how comedy, you know, just really, really, I think is just hitting such a nerve with the oppressor that I think we just need to keep doing more of it. So.
And Miriam, do you find ways to work that into the demonstrations?
Yeah, I think, sorry, one moment.
And not necessarily comedy, but you know how what you do and even what you do in film is really about empowerment. It's about solidarity. It's about bringing people together who actually believe and care about love, justice, and freedom.
Yeah, I think we used to have this joke we used to make about everyone who went to Afghanistan. It would be like we all went to save Afghanistan, but it ended up saving us. And I think this is something similar. We all stood up to fight for Palestine, but it liberated us instead. And, you know, it liberated us from the shackles of Hollywood. It liberated us from the shackles of capitalism. It liberated us from to be bold and to fight for one another fearlessly. And I think, you know, yes, you know, I think the little kid in me likes pissing off Zionists and cops the way I used to like pissing off my parents once upon a time, and gets off on that. But I think the greatest thing we have to offer right now to the community, I also organized in the anti-ICE movement, and I try to encourage people to boycott Home Depot right now over their complicity. And one of the great joys I've had is to go to these communities that are being dehumanized, that are being, you know, assaulted and kidnapped every single day. And they're like, they just have no hope about how they can overcome it. But one thing they do understand is the dehumanization of Palestinians. And so I always point to that and I say, look at BDS. Look at what BDS has been able to do. You know, we can't name someone we think has been more dehumanized systematically, you know, in an international scale than we've seen Palestinians. And so I think seeing the courage that we have seen now in BDS, you know, not just the pro-Palestine movement for the last 2 years, transfer over and inspire other folks is great. And I think we should always remember what it felt like, or how propagandized and how gaslit we had allowed ourselves even to become before October 7th, and how this radicalization, not this radicalization, but this truth-telling, you know, post-October 7th that let our community members really see the face of Israel. We can't let that go. We have to remind people at every corner, every time we get, chance we get, because we can never go back to how it was back then.
Can we get a big round of applause for Amer Zahr, Miriam Arghandiwal, and Rolla Selbak, and my fabulous partner on Middle Eastern Focus, Nagwa Ibrahim.
And thank you to all of you. Once again, round of applause to everyone in this room. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all.